Continuing our series of lectures on science fiction, today's lecture is Lecture 6, Religion in Science Fiction, Confronting the Elephant in the Room. And we say that because religion is so obviously a pivotal part of science fiction stories, so often that we've gotten used to it. And many times we don't even recognize how important it may be or what it may be doing. But often when it is in a science fiction work, it exists there because it is either confronting religions that are already real and is a criticism of those religions, or it is inventing religions of their own in order to exemplify what a better religion may be or a better belief may be. So here are some examples of what I mean. The first one is from the Illustrated Man, a collection of short stories by Ray Bradbury. There's one story called The Man, wherein a group of space travelers or Earthmen who travel to a nearby planet hear about a man who is performing miracles, and this planet is an entire state of bliss. And they come to realize that this man is Jesus. So one of them leaves on a spaceship, going from planet to planet, only to find out that the man had been there but had left. And he keeps going and going and going, while the other space travelers stay behind in that planet, only to discover that Jesus was there all along, right? So this one tries to understand Jesus, the historical man Jesus, as a kind of space traveler who is spreading the good news all across the galaxy, sort of, right? Take, for instance, this book, Behold a Man. It does something similar where it tries to understand the narrative of Jesus by uh, having a human travel back in time to the era of Jesus Christ, only so that he could witness Jesus Christ, and only finds that Jesus is a hopelessly retarded man and cannot be the historical Jesus. So he decides to give as many things as he remembers from the Bible for historical continuity, and he even feigns miracles through psychological tricks that he plays on the people. And by the end of the narrative, we realize that he has become the actual historical Jesus because he even dies on the cross. And this one, Jesus on Mars, I think the title sort of says everything, but that's essentially is what it is. It's a group of Earthmen and Martians who are stranded on the planet, and after some time, they meet this this Jesus character. This is in the future, a man who claims to be the historical Jesus, who is going back to Earth for the second coming. So we're going to talk about how works use existing religions or they invent their own. This section is about how works use existing religions in order to critique that religion or that system of belief altogether. All right, so here is the case of Conscience by James Blish. And here in this story, a missionary, Ruiz Sanchez, he travels to the planet Lithia, a planet that is a purely logical society that has no belief in God whatsoever, no belief in the supernatural, but yet they are happy. They are uh, well, they are moral, they are good. It is a perfect utopian world. But the missionary Reese Sanchez comes to the understanding that this Lithian society might have been created by Satan or something like that to distract Earth's people from God, because he cannot conceive of a planet like this one being created. Uh, Interestingly enough, but towards the end of the narrative, his friend who gives him this egg, this unhatched egg, which is, by the way, how the Lithians reproduce, is taken to Earth, and this egg, which then becomes the baby, this becomes the last surviving member of this society because near the end of the novel, the planet explodes and the entire interplanetary cooperation is destroyed. But the point of the narrative, or at least the critique of the narrative, because I don't want to focus so much on the plot, I want to focus more on the use of religion within the plot. The critique of religion here is that this missionary cannot come to the understanding that there can be a society without the idea, without the concept, without the belief of God, in that society be a functional one. And this egg baby is somewhat reminiscent of Jesus Christ. Now, we have three other stories that we can use as examples, two of which are actually just short stories. So we'll start with the last question by Isaac Asimov. Phenomenal story. In it, they create this computer Multivac, which the human population or human scientists are asking it a question from time to time. They're trying to understand how the second law of thermodynamics can be reversed, or how we can stop the world from ending, from going dark, right? And they ask it a question, and essentially for every generation, the answer of the machine is insufficient data for a meaningful response, until the very end of the story, wherein human beings have ascended to like purely cerebral beings, and they ask it a question. And the entire planet is dying, and the entire galaxy is going dark, and then the computer comes to the answer: "Let there be light," which is of course the idea of God, right? So we'll talk about the other two, and then we'll put them together, as in what their connection is. The Star by Clark is a it's a very interesting story, wherein a group of Earth explorers has arrived at a galaxy where they find that a planet there had existed before its sun went supernova and the entire planet was destroyed. But they also find that there is a remnant of a vault, a collection of all their memories and all their history of the planet. And this is in another planet far away, sort of like our own Pluto, far away from the blast radius. Anyway, so they discover that the vault, and they go over there and they find out that this civilization was very much like Earth civilization. I mean, it was human-like almost. They had beliefs, and they had ideas, and they had desires, and they had culture, and they had beliefs in their own supernatural beings and so on. So this society was apparently a wonderful society that was destroyed. Um, and the point of the narrative is revealed near the end, where the missionary, where the explorer, who is a Jesuit priest and an astrophysicist, comes to the moral concern of the novel, the issue, the problem. And the problem is that he can trace back the explosion of the planet to a moment when, presumably historically, Jesus was born. And this light, if you remember from the Bible story, is the star that heralds Jesus' birth. So the big question at the end is, how can God destroy an entire civilization to herald the birth of his son? Right. So I mean, these stories are using moments in religion in order to critique or to re-understand what that may mean, what they may mean in a religious context. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is not necessarily a religious sci-fi novel, but it does include one religion called Mercerism, which is very much like Christianity. It's got very Christian elements, but their differences are exactly the things that the novel is critiquing. So, in Mercerism, there is a man who suffers, and when you are connected to this virtual reality like thing, you can feel his pain, and in fact, his pain somehow alleviates your own. Um, in Mercerism is a kind of thing that not a lot of people believe in the novel, but somehow is there for some sort of like therapeutic, so to serve some sort of therapeutic service. So all three stories and works of the kind, what they do is that they use elements from real religions in order to critique those religions altogether, in order to come to the conclusion that something is wrong with the way we understand religion, or something is incomplete in the way we understand religion. So moving on to works that critique invented religions. These are especially interesting because these are the ones where the invented religion is often the missing link of the religions that we have, or an amalgamation of religions that already exist, all combined into one kind of religion. Now, looking at The Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein, this is one of the most famous invented religions, the Church of All Worlds. And if you're thinking, though not necessarily a sci-fi, book and not covered in this lecture, if you're thinking about the Jedi religion as an example in movies, then you are right. In many ways, Jedi religion has become a real thing for some people somewhere. And this is exactly what happens with the invented religions. They often, in novels, and novels that are successful, they catch on, and people somehow enjoy this religious ideology. All right, so this religion is founded by Valentine Michael Smith, a survivor of the first expedition to Mars, who was raised by Martians, and he is brought back to Earth 25 years later, where the Earth population is essentially hedonistic, and these people are gaining influence and power on Earth. But Smith's Church of All Worlds wants to eh, wants to inculcate empathy, the empathy learned from the Martians, and the idea is that every individual can be God. Now, if you're thinking, wow, that sounds like a combination of different religions altogether, you're right. This story has a way of bringing in different elements, different religions, and then putting them together. This is one example of the amalgamation. This kind of religion, or this church of all worlds, became a real religion and a movement founded in 1962, and the religion remains in existence today, unfortunately. Now, the parable of the sower and the second part of the parable of the talents by Octavia Butler is written by a feminist black author whose own personal life features in the novel. So the novel itself is very much aware of race and about the place of women in the world. But while I won't be discussing the novel necessarily, I'll cover the plot as quickly as I can so I can focus on the religion, Earthseed, which is a combination of, I don't know how many exactly, but you'd have to think Buddhism, Taoism. There are some African religions also mixed in this one. But this religion essentially is its focus is on empathy, since the main character, Lauren Olamina, is empathetic. So she has some sort of a biological condition that allows her to feel too deeply, essentially. So the point of the religion, Earthseed, or one of the main tenets of the religion, is the necessity for change, or rather, that change is immutable and change will happen all the time, and there's nothing we can do about it. And all we can do is to experience change and to empathize. So in many ways, well, actually, she says it: change is God. God is change. And this religion altogether is interesting because it tries to bring empathy and love into a chaotic Earth, which is in the year 2024, I believe, or 2026. Either way, right around the corner from us. And the implication here is that there's a series of plagues and diseases and poverty and a strong man leader who's more occupied with the appearance of the nation than with the actual destiny of the nation and or the well-being of the nation. And in the year 2026 is where things start going wrong. So we'll see how right she was in a few years. So in the model of Heinlein's sci-fi stories, whether it's a what if or if only, if this goes on, these three are the types of sci-fi stories you can always, well, you can pretty much expect the what if this happens, if only this other thing would happen, and if this goes on, then we will arrive at this conclusion. So this last one, if this goes on, this is the one that Octavia was criticizing. If we continue in this direction that she saw the country going, then we will arrive at her ultimate conclusion, which is the novel. And as the novel continues and ends in the parable of the talents, Lauren's own daughter is has created a community that is constantly being attacked by a group called Christian America. And the purpose for imagining this gentle and tolerant religion is that it reflects science fiction's most central principle, the idea of change and the idea of unity. So this religion altogether also shows the destructive potential that religion can have when it is in the wrong hands. And here we're talking, of course, of the group called Christian America. All right. So reflections on religion in science fiction. Whether these works are dealing with existing or invented religions, their criticism is often of the very idea of organized religion. And I want to make that clear because a lot of the criticism in these novels is not necessarily of the idea of belief or the idea of the belief in the supernatural per se, or the idea is the criticism is often on dogma, on criticized religion, on the way the belief is practiced and enforced by a certain organization. That's often the focus, and I want to make that distinction clear because I think it's important. Religion, also in science fiction, is used as a window to moral and ethical issues. When a religion is used or critiqued in a work of science fiction, it's less about the religion itself and more about the moral or ethical concern, because that added layer of complexity is what gives the novel an added understanding. Also, science fiction often replaces, and this is crucial, the supernatural or fantastical view of God for the technological or scientific view of God. So, for instance, science fiction is not necessarily including God because it wants to criticize the idea of God. Science fiction includes God because, like stories that came before it, which is the supernatural and the horrific and fantasy, they already used uh, godlike elements. So science fiction, all they're doing is using the same elements, but with a technological or with a scientific perspective. So the machines become God, or planets, or things like that. And this is important. All science fiction is doing is using what a lot of the stories of the like, of the fantasy type, have used for generations, but they see it through the scientific lens. Also, the religion the religion seems to be an integral part of a community or a society in science fiction, meaning almost no society or community depicted in science fiction is without its own religious values or its own beliefs, whether they are spiritual or not. They're often, seems to be like an integral part of a community, which is very interesting that even in science fiction we'd find the need, or these writers would find the need, to replicate the presence of religion in their characters' own lives. And finally, religion is the foundation for all civilizations. So science fiction understands that it must look into the past of religion, into the way religion has interacted with people before, in order to create the futures that it seeks to invent. It cannot look into the future without considering what religion is like now. So in many ways, religion is not only a cornerstone, but I would say a foundation of science fiction works. Okay, that's the end of the lecture. Thank you.